everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Emmy and thank you guys for coming back, or if you're here for the first time, welcome. I make videos on specifically Paladin supports because I've played them for so long. Before we get started, I'd just like to say thank you for all the comments and support and time you guys have put into my videos. I see them all, I hear you, and I will be posting a poll after this video as well with 5 other support options. Some of them will be repeats from the last poll, some of them will be new, just to see what you guys are looking for. As I say in every video, this is my opinion and my opinion only. There is no way to play Paladins that is the right way. These are just my opinions and how I play, and that's okay if it doesn't correlate to how you play or how you want to play. This video is going to be on Rei because after my last video on Ying, I posted a poll and overwhelmingly you guys wanted to see a full video on Rei. So here we are. Before we even get into her abilities or her talents or anything about Rei, there's something that needs to be said about this character. Rei is what I would say, a pretty high level healer. She's a very high skill, high reward character. So when played poorly, you can get by with her, but when played on a high level, she is pretty dominating in the game. It can really turn the tide of how your team is going to play, what fights they're going to pick, and how you're going to be able to give them that survivability. That being said, she does not work with every single team. And the key to having a good Rei game is truly your team. If your team is not grouping up, her healing is void. It is not going to be helpful. I'll explain later about her healing and what it does, but you'll quickly understand that if you're not near someone for her chain heal, it's not going to be healing anyone but you and that person that you're next to. Having groups of 3 or 4 with Rei makes your team almost unstoppable a lot of the time. Since it's essential to have those at least 3 to 4 teammates in a space together and not having just 2 people, she really does require an element of teamwork that you can achieve in casual games, and I have for a really long time. I've been in games where teams will be absolutely steamrolling us. It will be a 3-0 and my team starts grouping up, and once they do, we're absolutely steamrolling them because my healing has now become useful to my team. Without it, it's just bouncing your healing back and forth from 1 or 2 people, and it's very unproductive. So a lot of you I see saying, I just cannot get the hang of Rei. It may not just be your playstyle and you could do all the things I'm telling you in this video. If you don't have a team that's set up to make her succeed as a healer, she can be really difficult. However, that should not deter you from playing her at all. Rei's primary fire is Sigil. You unleash magical energy from your hands, dealing 450 damage every 0.7 seconds. This actually has pretty great range and damage, and you can go as far as 300 without a damage drop-off, and obviously 450 damage is nothing to scoff at for a support. Rei's Q ability is Spirit Link. Tether your spirit to an ally or enemy player. While linked to an ally, you heal them for 50 and grant them 0.5% ult charge for every 1 second. When linked to an enemy, reduce their movement speed by 10% and deal 50 damage every 0.75 seconds. This is actually a really unique part of Rei in my opinion. I feel like other supports don't really have that aspect of linking to the target, but to me, the healing of her link is not the key here. It is the ult charge and the healing buffs it can give when you use certain cards. Rei is all about support. She's not all about healing. Her healing is massive, don't get me wrong, but you can get similar healing with other healers. But her ult charge is what sets her apart. There's a big difference between being a support and a healer, in my opinion. So when you are a healer, you are doing just healing. That is what you are doing. You are healing your team. But as a support, you're doing more supportive roles that aren't just healing. Yes, you're helping your team, but you're doing damage reduction. You're helping zone the other team. You're getting bulldozer and helping take out turrets or deployables if necessary to help your team be able to thrive on that point. When attaching to another player, you really need to think about who you are attaching to, especially if you're using certain cards that don't let you unattach. When attaching to certain champions with Rei, you want to think about the kit of the person that you're attaching to and what plays they're doing at that moment. Attaching to champions like Strix or Skye or people who are going to be going invisible is not always going to be the most beneficial. Sometimes it's helpful because you're priming them to peek or push, but it's not always going to be helpful in every circumstance. Thinking about attaching to flanks is also something that you need to consider, because if you have an Eevee or a 7 who is about to go flank around the back line, you're ruining the element of surprise by attaching a line to them and making it so that the enemy team is going to notice that somebody's back there. A big part of her Spirit Link is always having somebody attached to it, even if you don't necessarily need to heal anybody. Like I mentioned earlier, her ult charge is really what sets her apart from other healers. So having it on somebody constantly, especially somebody who has a valuable ult, think Ashe, Fernando, someone who can really change up who's going to take that point. It's important to continuously charge those ultimates because that is a huge part of your kit that you're just leaving out if you're not doing that. The aim of Spirit Link is a little weird. So when you look at an enemy, you're going to see the plus healing symbol like you usually do with any other healer. However, that is only for your chain heal. When you are aiming to put your Spirit Link on somebody, you need to be looking for the little tulip above their head. When you are running just a regular healing Rei, it will prioritize allies over enemies. There is an exception which we'll talk about later, but for the most part, you're going to prioritize allies over enemies in the game's programming. It can be a little hard to learn how to aim with the tulip at first because it's not always spot on who you're looking at. It can be a little bit wonky and it does take a little while to get used to. It's very similar to how when you first start playing with Makoa's hook, it can be really hard to aim, but once you learn the technique of doing it, it can become second nature for you. Her alt fire is Chain Heal. Manifest arcane forces and send it forth, bouncing between your initial target up to 4 additional allies, healing them for 520 per bounce. Spirit-linked allies are healed for 30% more. Unlike Ying, they actually made her bounce based off of the percentage of health. In my last video, I talked about how Ying's clones go off of the base health, how much health a person has. And with Rei, they actually took the time to make it a percentage of health. It wasn't like this at the beginning, but they patched it later. So her chain heal will bounce to people depending on the low percentage of health that they have. A really good thing that I do is I actually use myself as a bridge for people. So if there's someone who is a little too far, I will get in between the people I'm trying to bounce from and use myself as that bridge between them so that I maybe will get both of them. On the subject of her chain heal, I have gotten a lot of comments of you guys asking me if I have had the bug with Rei. The bug goes as such. Her chain heal will bounce, and it's supposed to bounce 4 times. However, it will only bounce 2 to 3 times, and then it will disappear seemingly. It also doesn't give you the healing, so it truly has disappeared. It's not just a texture issue. I have encountered this myself. I have had issues with it. However, I have not been able to replicate it in testing recently. I tried quite a bit and I wasn't able to get it. Maybe there's one in the recorded footage that I have up, but I just haven't been able to catch it. My running theory as to this, because I haven't struggled with it in a while, however, my running theory is that this is more of a problem with the talent extension and less of a problem with chain heal itself. Since I don't really experience it very often or at all whenever I'm running my focus build, I wonder if it is more of a problem with extension and not just an issue with the chain heal ability itself. I have no evidence to back this up since I've not been able to replicate it and I don't really play extension that much. But if anybody has any knowledge of that, feel free to put it in the comments, but I was not really able to replicate it. Her movement ability is Envelop. Reduce the maximum amount of damage you take to 275 per instant of damage and increase your movement speed and jump height for 3 seconds. Linked allies are also now enveloped. Nearby allies take 20 damage every 0.2 seconds. First of all, a lot of people don't know that enemies around you will take damage, so using it when you're surrounded by a ton of people, I mean, it's not going to be super helpful, but it still will deal a little bit of damage. If you envelop yourself before attaching to an ally and then you attach them while you're enveloped, it will not envelop that ally. If you do it too late at the end of your Spirit Link, it also will not. And if you end it for you, it does not end it for them. This is a huge part of Rei's defense, And I'll get to later why this is so useful, not just for the damage reduction, but also for her movement. Rei's ult is Vivify. Infuse a linked ally with life, making them immune to damage for 2 seconds and healing them by 75% after a brief delay. You also gain the benefits. You used to have to be spirit linked to an ally in order to ult, but this is no longer the case. You can just ult on yourself and not heal any ally at that time. You also used to be 100% immune, and a lot of people don't know this, but you are no longer 100% immune to damage and crowd control when ulting. In fact, they took that out and replaced it that you have 50% damage reduction. You also only heal allies and yourself up to 75% instead of the former 100. This is an amazing ability to use to save your tanks from a Drogo's ult or some sort of ult that would be a pretty big insta-kill. So I would highly recommend using this at a time whenever your tank is about to die instead of just trying to heal them to full. Rei's level 0 talent is Extension. Increase the range of chain heal bounces by 40%. At base, her chain heal has a 95 radius. So if you take that 40%, it gives it 133. To me, that's not a big enough change, and considering this does not augment her healing, I personally do not use this card. This is a very good beginner card to introduce you to Rei and kind of get you the time that you need to get acquainted with her and her abilities. However, I discussed this in my first video on healing tips, that this card does make her healing worse in some ways. When it has to go that far to get to an ally and then come back, it's going to take a little bit longer to go on cooldown. I recommend this for low level players, but once you get into higher levels, I would recommend a different card. Her level 2 talent is Restraint. While Envelop is active and you are linked to an enemy, prevent them from healing. Something that a lot of people don't know is this also makes it so your Spirit Link now no longer prioritizes your allies over your enemies. That was changed a while ago, and the wiki still has it as the incorrect description. However, that was something that was changed quite a bit ago. I personally do not use this card, even when I've run a damage Rei, simply because it looks so good. It looks like it's an amazing card. However, in practice, it's just not where it needs to be. There's very rare moments that it's easy to use. There's very rare moments where it's beneficial to use and not to use your Envelop for yourself instead of just them. Since Envelop is such a key part of her kit, forfeiting that and making it an offensive ability where you're using it to benefit yourself against an enemy instead of benefiting your defense, that can be really detrimental, and I don't really find this card beneficial to my playstyle. Her level 8 card is Focus. Spirit Link's cooldown is increased to 7 and now only lasts for 4 seconds, but its effects are tripled. This is the card that I use, and I will explain why. It heals for 150 every 1 second instead of the base 50. It grants 1.5 ult charge for every second, meaning 3% every 2 seconds, which is great. And when you attach to an enemy, it damages them for 150. Spirit Link also can't be broken by distance or obstacles. If you are going behind a wall, it cannot unlink like your normal one would. With your base chain heal, if it goes behind walls or obstacles, it is going to give a few seconds and then break. It is not going to continue working. With this, it guarantees that that link lasts 4 seconds no matter what. And it resets with your ultimate. So if you ult someone right at the end of that 4 seconds, even if they're across the map, it will reset that link for you. I recommend this card, even though it is quite a steep learning curve. I recognize that not everybody would enjoy this card and not everybody is going to enjoy the challenge that it brings, but personally, I really like it. It makes me actually think about who I am attaching to because I cannot instantly change it. I have a 7-second cooldown. So I really enjoy the dimension that it brings to her character and the thought it makes me have in my prioritization on who I need to be healing. It also gives her a massive healing output. It makes her utility of her ult charge a lot better. And when you run this card, you can charge characters ult like Fernando so quickly, and that can change a battle so much. This is my current up-to-date loadout with Rei. I actually really enjoy it, and I've tried a lot of different ones, but this is the one that I've landed on that I feel like benefits my playstyle the most. I think a card that most people should be running is the Refreshing Break card. It's just such a good card. And like I said earlier, Rei's biggest utility about her and her biggest thing that other healers simply do not possess is being able to supercharge ults. So I think that this card is a fantastic card to include whenever you're building your deck. Future Generations is also a really nice card to have because sometimes you take a lot of damage really quick, and instantly having that cooldown on your heal can save you so often. I know for me it has come in so handy, and it's something I use a lot. I really like Spring to Action because it seriously increases the healing that you're doing. If you're using Focus, you're healing your linked ally for 250 instead of 150, and that's also with your chain heal. That is a large amount to be adding to your healing pool, giving that extra 100 for the chain link. For Enveloping Magic, I enjoy this card. I know a lot of people tend to use it, and I actually think it's as good as people think it is. I don't tend to run it at the very top one because my build is not built around Envelop. However, I do still use this card, and I think it's a fantastic card to add to your deck. Echo Forces is my card that I could replace with a multitude of cards, but I chose this one just because I felt like it benefited my playstyle the best, but there's plenty of cards you could replace with this. Some cards that would be really good to swap that one out for would be things like Midnight Stroll if you're trying to go a little more defensive. It could be Arcane Maelstrom or Midnight Stroll, just depending on which way you're wanting to go, more envelop based or more defense based. Cards I would stay away from would be one like Lepori Prayer or Arcane Manipulation. Arcane Manipulation is just kind of a ridiculous card in my opinion. At max, you're only reducing it by like 1.5 seconds, and it just has no reason to be there. I don't really see the benefit of this card because it's such a low change. I would just pass on this one. Lepori Prayer could be used in sets of circumstances, but I just feel like there's items that would be better for this, and it's unlikely that your teammate's going to be reloading in the max 2.5 seconds that you would have chain healed them. I just don't know if that's like the best card to put in your deck. I'm sure that somebody has found a use for both of those cards, but personally, I've never really found a deck that those fit in for me. So let me know in the comments if you have. I just haven't. When you're defending yourself as Rei, a very big part of how you play her is her movement. She has a great movement speed and a great jump height, and the way that her model is made is very tall and slender. It makes her quite hard to hit, especially if you are moving and jumping around all the time. Envelop should not just be used for that damage reduction, but also the movement it gives you. As stated earlier, it increases your jump height and your movement speed. It increases your jump height by 50% actually. That's an insane number to have, and it can seriously get you out of some bad situations. It can also reduce those shots that they're getting on you. There's no shame in ulting to protect yourself, especially if your team is on its way or if you just get that one last shot in. Try not to waste your ult when doing this, but I've used my ult on myself many times. It's not as easy to do since they made that patch that makes it so you're not 100% immune anymore, but that's completely understandable. It was a little broken, but my biggest tip is to just never stop moving, never stop jumping, never stop moving, because personally, with my friend group who I play with, one of them is a sniper, and he hates playing against Reis because they're just the worst to snipe. He says they move too much, they jump too much, they're too mobile, and they're just very annoying. They're not impossible. There's some snipers that are absolutely going to obliterate you, but they're just very annoying, and the more you move, the better it's going to be for your health pool. There's also no shame in attaching to an enemy. If you're dying and you need to fight somebody off, I almost always attach to an enemy when I'm fighting them. It's giving that extra burst of damage and reducing their movement speed. And so I just think that it's wise to attach to somebody, because in order for you to heal anybody, you have to be alive. So I think it's better to fight off an attacker, and a few of your teammates die, then you go down and then the rest of your team goes down. So sometimes it's better to take that defensive stance instead of trying to keep your team up while you're dying. Like I said when I started this video, Rei is really at her best when she's in enclosed spaces. So looking at the maps that she's really good on, you're thinking Bright Marsh, you're thinking Frozen Guard, Jaguar Falls, Warder's Gate, maps that are pretty enclosed, and when your team is near each other, they're near each other. Now, these maps can also have downfalls if your team's not grouping. These can be the worst maps ever. However, this is assuming that your team is grouping and playing how they should be with a Rei on their team. These are the maps that I would recommend her on. Bright Marsh, very clear. It's a very small, confined space. Frozen Guard, also a very confined space on point, and it does give few openings to the flank route and gives you plenty of places to peek in to heal. Jaguar Falls is a very compact map. It's just really great for her because it can even bounce from the point tank all the way to the side flanks, and it can heal your teammates even when they're not necessarily grouping on point. Warder's Gate is kind of that same case because it is so compact at that point cap that it is really good to use her chain heal, especially when your teammates are fighting on point. In the middle tier with Fish Market or Ascension Peak or things like that, Fish Market is just a little too open and there's a little too many walls separating the areas that are so spread apart. Ascension Peak, while it is super enclosed, those statues can pose kind of an issue, and it's just kind of a little too enclosed with walls and doesn't really have enough areas that your chain heal can bounce as easily. Ice Mines is kind of that same issue. I almost put it in high tier, but I feel that sometimes it can get a little bit confused when it's trying to heal on Ice Mines, just because of all of the walls that go down and issues along those lines. So I just kind of tend to not play her as much on Ice Mines. I wouldn't say that she's bad by any means on there. I just tend to not play her as much on that map. Serpent Beach is a little too enclosed with the walls and a little too separated into defined lanes for her to be able to heal as well as she could. Because the lanes are separated by big thick walls, it's kind of hard to be able to heal your flanks when they need it, unlike on something like Jaguar Falls or Frozen Guard. Since Stone Keep has elevations and it has different types of areas you can go to, it can be a little difficult to heal on there because you're not really able to anticipate as much with the elevations where your chain heal is going to go. So if you have a person up top and then a person on point, it might bounce to the person up top, but you can't really be sure. The worst maps I would say for her are Frog Isle, simply because of all the statues and things around. Sometimes the chain heal just doesn't count it there and it can be kind of weird. It is pretty open and the lanes aren't too defined, but it's still pretty spread out with a lot of obstacles in the way. Shattered Desert just doesn't tend to be a great map for her. I found that she just doesn't perform well there. And it might be because of all the obstacles, it might be because of how defined it is and how laid out the lanes are. Timbermill back again at the bottom. It just isn't a great map for her. It's so open, it has elevation, it's so huge. She doesn't work great on that map and doesn't really have a good synergy with it. I promise there are healers that are good on there. Rei just isn't one of them. There isn't really any skins that are necessarily good with Rei. Her healing is pretty stagnant across the board and there's not really any skins that make her better in any way. So whatever skin you like of hers is what skin you should use. When it comes to her playstyle, I really hope that you guys learned something and kind of understand a little more how she plays as a healer. I know some of you said you were having so much trouble with her, so I hope some of this made it a little clearer for you. Thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I really appreciate your time. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. I plan to do another one after this, like I said, so check out the poll after this video, and thank you so much for being here.